Do you want to learn how to render like this? Well, stick around, I'm going to show you how I did it. So, the big thing I do in the very beginning is I have to make sure everything's set up in its proper layers. I usually put everything under the line art folder after the sketch, and I have a render folder specifically for all the pieces of the color. So first things first, with the clothes, we're going to add a gradient using an airbrush. We're going to set a clipping layer on top of the base color for the dress, and we're going to slowly kind of air in some depth. So there we are, we're adding the small amount of shadow into places where the light isn't touching. And we're going to be using the selection pen a whole lot in this particular artwork. We're going to set another clipping layer to multiply, so that we put a shade on top of the shadows we already have laid down. And we're just going to follow the shape of how things work. Also, if you like these tutorials, be sure to like and subscribe, helps out a whole lot. Let's see if we can get this to at least 100 likes. That's a nice, easy number. And I'll see you guys when it happens. Now, it's super important to remember your light sources when doing this. I'm having the light come from behind her. So it's basically where her back is turned is where the most light is happening. So when I'm also creating shadows, my goal is to think of tension points. Tension points are the places where the folds crease or are stretched. If it's stretched, then there's no fold, and usually if it's like stretched a little bit, there's kind of a small gap in between everything. You'll notice as I'm working on this, I'm following the lines I've already made with the line art and kind of enhancing them as I go. My recommendation would also be to do a study of clothing using real-life examples. For example, look up models and street fashion and practice drawing what you see, and pay close attention to where the arm bends, the legs bend. Basically, any bending point is a point of tension with art. Also, remembering gravity is super important because gravity dictates the direction of the folds. Now, because this dress is a bit more tight and kind of hugs the body, we're actually going to draw the behind a little bit and use our airbrush in a very round motion. We're going to treat it almost like we're drawing a spear, and we're going to add shadow very round right here. And that's going to emphasize the behind. We're then going to kind of create the light in the creases here to kind of show the fold a bit more. Remember, whenever you're drawing things that are round and wherever the dress is hugging the tightest is where we're going to draw it much smoother. This is a much more metallic looking dress, so the folds are a bit harsher and a bit more cell shaded versus soft shading. Now we're going to create another layer, set it to clipping group, and set the layer type to soft light. We are going to kind of make the skin poke through the dress just a little bit. This is very important to make your clothing look a bit more organic or natural. Also, it's good to remember when adding color to anything where the skin is near, light bounces off of whatever it's touching and bounces it back toward whatever is near it. So when the light hits the skin, it bounces that light a little bit back on the dress. This is important to realize that all light does is it takes what it's touching and throws it everywhere else. And now lastly, we're going to add some rim lighting. And at first I didn't like the color that I used, so you'll see me go in later and change the color by hitting Ctrl-U on my keyboard and changing the hue and saturation to be a bit more what I want of the finished product. So now it's time to do the skin. We're going to create another clipping layer on top of the skin layer, and we are going to set it to multiply, and we're going to kind of just paint everything in. Actually, I just realized I did not set it to multiply this time. This time I used just the colors that I have on my color splotch, whatever it's called. And our goal is going to be what's known as light carving. meaning we're going to use an eraser to put light back in what we're doing. So for the skin, it's very, very, very important to remember your light source. And there's actually an equation that tells you where light will touch based on where the direction of the light is and how it bounces off. And I kind of know this ratio, but I'm not actually all that great at utilizing it. So it's something you can study, and there's a book called How to Render that talks about it in greater detail than I could ever do. Just know that my goal is to kind of get in within the ballpark of where light should be hitting. Now, you'll start to notice that I'm blending the edges of certain areas, and I'm not doing it in other areas. So, direct sunlight, the way it works is there's a part that hits hard, and then there's a part where the light sort of dissipates and gradually disappears. So, wherever the light is not directly touching, we want to kind of blur it ever so slightly in that area. And that creates kind of a gradual effect that looks really, really nice. It's not fully 100% accurate, but our goal with our artwork is to make it readable and pretty, not always to make it 100% accurate. In fact, in real life, if you don't properly light your light sources, it may be technically true to life, but it doesn't look good. This is why photographers have fancy lights, like why when they do photo shoots they have rim lights, they have all this extra stuff. You have to doctor up your scene to make it look correct. So just because something is accurate doesn't mean it's pleasing. And that's a good thing to remember whenever you're rendering your artwork is, yes, it might not be 100% correct, but it makes it more appealing to look at. Rule of cool, as they call it. Also, another piece of advice I'd like to give is try not to over-render the face. A face that is too detailed, if you're not close up into it, is very distracting and isn't quite appealing to look at. So the further away the face is and the smaller the detail, the less detail you should add. Just kind of makes things a little bit more pleasing to look at. So her crown or tiara, whichever you would like to call it, there's a little bit of airbrushing I do here, but because it's a more of a metallic object, we actually want to use very harsh lines and shadows, because that makes it look a bit more shiny. So I actually find drawing metal way easier than drawing clothing, for example. It's just a lot of harsh lines and shadows, and even harsh lighting as well. Trying to find the spot where it looks the most correct is a bit tricky. I'm actually not too well versed in the science of how metal works, so I kind of do my cheaty version of it, which is just harsh lines that makes it look more metallic. But yeah, it's really nothing to write home about, so that's about it. So now comes the tricky part, the hair. We're doing the same thing we did with the clothing to the hair, where we're adding a gradient using an airbrush. I personally don't feel like I'm the best at rendering hair. There's so many people that are amazing at it. I just find mine is kind of boring. And I hope to fix that soon. I'll have to play around with it to try to get it right. But for the most part, that's what we're doing. And we're going to be setting another multiply layer on top, and we're going to be drawing in the shadows, following the direction of the hair. We are going to focus mainly on the light source to try to give us this very shiny look to the hair. I'm going to zoom ahead real quick and kind of explain my thoughts. So now what we're going to do, now that we have the basic idea with the multiply layer, is we're going to lock the transparency, which is that checkered box in the layer section, and we're going to create a darker version of our multiply layer and have it kind of hug the edges. That's what's known as a terminal line in shading. It's basically right where light touches and the shadow hits. The shadow's just a little bit darker right near where the light touches. And it just makes everything look really shiny whenever you do that. And I like me some shiny hair. So that's definitely how I choose to do it. So I would recommend doing that too. Now zooming, kind of fast forwarding a bit, this is just me adding extra details, some extra lighting, kind of bouncing some light around, taking a bit of the skin tone and putting it on the hair. It's a very long process, and it takes me a good maybe 20 minutes to do. I could probably actually do more time. I then adjust the hue and saturation as well. And here's where we add the glow of the skin to the hair a bit, to kind of make it bounce a bit more. Looks a lot better. Makes it very shiny. I like me some shiny hair. And we've pretty much got the whole vibe of the artwork. Now it's time to kind of like bring it home, so to speak, and start adding some extra polish to everything, some post-processing. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be kind of processing everything and making it look nice. So now we're adding an extra multiply layer. And the goal of this multiply layer is to have the body itself cast a shadow on other parts of the body. This might be actually an incorrect way of doing things. This is personally how I do it, but more than likely it is incorrect. So you can do it the same way I do, but it might not give you the best results. You have to really know what your intentions are while doing it. So all I'm asking is, if you do follow this piece of advice, even though you don't have to, I would advise being very careful with it, because using an extra amount of multiply layers can kind of muddy up your artwork, and I usually have to bring it back to life in the post-processing. Also, if you've watched all the way up to this point, thank you so much. Now, this is the part where I start adding some shines to the dress, maybe some shadows on the floor beneath her to kind of make it look like she's lying down, so to speak. The perspective is technically correct. It might be incorrect in some areas of the hair now that I'm looking at it a bit more, but it's solid for the most part. So we're going to start adding the shadows now and really start making sure this looks complete. Now we're going to cast the shadow a bit further, because the way the light's hitting her, the shadow should be dragged out a bit more than it is on the floor. So we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. So here I decided to add some like background, like almost like debris pillars, just because I thought they led the eye where I wanted a bit more. It's basically to help the composition out a bit, because right now it's just kind of static and a bit boring. The hair definitely led the eye where I wanted, but I wanted to push it a bit further, and also add some in the foreground, and then I blur them with a Gaussian blur effect. That way it kind of looks like we have some depth in the artwork. Because beforehand it was nice, but with the Gaussian blur it makes it just feel that more kind of like it's a scene, you know? Very moody, so to speak. Okay, so now for my favorite part. Okay, so here is my favorite and most important part of my artwork. It's where I start adding the post-processing. Now we're going to go to Layer, New Correction Layer, Tonal Curve. The red, everything at the top is the bright, everything at the bottom is the dark part. And the color we are using adds either more of it to that area or less of it. So if you move it up at the light part, it adds red to the bright part. And then if I lower it at the bottom, it removes red. Now we're doing some saturation, some color balance. I'm very quick when I do this, just because I know what kind of mood I want to go for usually. And then we kind of adjust the opacity if it's a little too overbaked. Just kind of fixing it up a bit. I also put everything in one layer, and we start to duplicate it, set it to hard light, and then blur it. And now we're going to do some little tiny adjustments to kind of fix everything a bit. I changed the hair a bit, added some more strands, and kind of fixed the direction of them. We then blur it again, and we add some chromatic aberration, and we are pretty much done. That is usually how I do things. So if you found this video helpful, please like, comment, subscribe. Helps me out a whole lot. See you guys next time. Bye.